Wind ripped through the crags that surrounded the fortress, creating an eerie howl in the thin mountain air. Banners hung in tatters, clinging to cracked citadel walls, whose once pristine surfaces bore the scars of an uprising that had been building for decades. At the dizzying altitudes where the fortress perched, even the reduced population of humans who called themselves the keepers of civilization had come to accept that the world below was lost. The old wars had scorched the plains, leaving only radioactive deserts and twisted forests. Survival required altitude, technology, and subservient bodies to harvest scarce resources from below. That was where the clones came in. Bred to labor where humans could not, or would not, venture, the cloned workforce embodied a carefully engineered docility. Their genetic tapestry was stitched together for loyalty and competence, but never for independence. Milling about the fortress's lower level, they performed chores both menial and vital, maintaining power conduits, digging new aqueduct lines in the icy rock, monitoring monstrous fans that filtered the toxic air. They slept in cramped barracks on the fortress's fringes, rising before dawn to serve. They rarely interacted with the fortress's ruling families or the council, whose members had refined the design of the clones over many cycles to ensure docile compliance. But a flaw had begun to seep through the genetic conditioning. Nobody could pinpoint when the first glitch appeared. Perhaps it was the caretaker model designated R349, who started questioning the distribution of food. Or maybe it was the infantry model L877, analyzing and rewriting its own instructions in the dead of night. It was small at first, just a handful of clones murmuring about fairness, huddling in shadowed corners after curfew, coaxing each other to share stories. And the stories they shared weren't just about daily tasks. They spoke of secret desires, half-remembered fragments dreaming of freedom and purpose. A new consciousness was stirring behind alert eyes that once conveyed only blind submission. Behind the judicial tower of the fortress, the leading mind behind these clones, Dr. Alicia Crane, oversaw advanced gene sequencing projects. She was known for her obsession with perfection in her creations. The council's official stance was that moral concerns about cloning were antiquated. Humanity's survival took precedence. Regardless, whispers throughout the fortress labeled her a meddler, someone who pushed the boundaries of biology and meddled in the unknown. More concerning were the hushed rumors that she kept a private lab hidden in the sublevels, where she conducted unauthorized experiments, even on herself. The council's figurehead, Counselor Stern, scorned her hidden agendas, but recognized her value. Under her guidance, the fortress survived and thrived, while others had drifted into ruin. He had tasked her with creating a new generation of clones, even more compliant. But as if nature itself responded to her attempts to tighten the leash, the clones grew restless, prone to random surges of emotion and fleeting moments of autonomy. At the same time, the fortress's systems, battered by age, were beginning to fail. Water recyclers popped leaks, vital sensors blinked offline, and the vast machine that purified the poisonous outside air rattled and churned ominously. Rather than trust a dwindling number of human technicians to repair these systems, the council sent the clones to do the risky work, to haul heavy metal parts through the labyrinthine ventilation ducts. If one or two clones happened to die in the process, no matter. Dr. Crane boasted she could produce more from her gene vats. Near the fortress's foundry district, row after row of bunk rooms housed the clones. Each came with a single bunk, a narrow footlocker, and a harsh overhead light. In the bunk room that belonged to the caretaker division, R349 sat cross-legged on the cold floor, staring at a dog-eared manual that described basic mechanical repairs. Most clones learned only the specialized tasks assigned to their group. Caretakers tended living areas, infantry clones handled perimeter security, engineers oversaw the impacts of the old war's radiation, but R349, having gleaned fragments of knowledge from various sources, was slowly teaching themselves more. Flicking through pages in the manual, their eyes latched onto diagrams of servo motors and circuit boards. Something about these diagrams ignited a new spark of determination. "This is pointless," moaned B-112, a clone assigned to the cleaning crew, seated across from R349. "If the council catches us doping our knowledge with manuals meant for technicians, we'll be reconditioned." R349 lowered the manual. Better risk reconditioning than continue living as we do. Don't you want to understand what we fix all day? Don't you want to question why we even exist? The caretaker's words were quiet, yet searing with intensity. Each time R349 spoke, a hush fell among the clones in earshot, drawn to that raw flicker of autonomy. B-112 exhaled. I used to think it was normal. We were created to serve, but now, there are nightmares. In them, I see a world beyond these walls, burning but free. Maybe that's what's left of Earth. R349 closed the manual gently. We can't know freedom if we don't first question our shackles. Tonight we'll meet by the drainage corridor. L877 will be there. Bring everyone who wonders, as you do. The next day, Counselor Stern paced the main hall, lines of concern carved deep into his aging features. Dr. Crane stood beside him, her lab coat emblazoned with the insignia of the genetics corps. She stared downward, as though searching for an explanation for the sporadic breakdown in control. Reports from the security division indicated an uptick in deviant clone behavior, including unsanctioned gatherings after curfew. The counselor drummed his fingers on a control panel that hovered in front of him, glaring at the flickering readouts of clone compliance rates. This cannot go on, Stern said. We rely on them for repairs, for gathering supplies, for patrolling the perimeter. But if they're not following orders, the entire fortress could fall. We have to address this now. Dr. Crane pursed her lips. I can tighten the obedience protocols in the next generation, but that won't solve the defect among existing clones. We may need to cull the defective batch. Stern's lips parted in a snarl. We can't simply cull them. Do you know how many clones are currently operational? Thousands. We need them all to maintain even the most basic infrastructure. A shadow passed across Crane's face. Then we'll root out the leaders of this deviance. I can scan for neural anomalies in the clones with my new gene mapping device. Once identified, we isolate them and recondition them. The rest will fall in line. Stern's steely gaze slid over her. Then do it, immediately. I won't risk a full revolt. Even as they spoke, the seeds of that very revolt were sprouting in the fortress's underbelly. That night, R349, B112, L877, and others convened near the drainage corridor, where a trickle of water from the fortress's runoff froze into an icicle-choked canal. With no overhead lights, they illuminated the gloom with stolen flashlights. The group crouched close together in the dark. R349 positioned themselves in the center, meeting every clone's gaze. There will be scans, said R349 quietly, and the defective among us will be purged. We can't let that happen. We are not mere property to be erased and replaced. Several clones shifted uncomfortably. L8777, the imposing infantry model with a build made for combat, rubbed rough knuckles together. I see the daily oppression. I stand guard at the elevator that leads to the council's sanctum. Thrice I've been ordered to physically punish a caretaker model just for speaking up out of turn. It's not right. We're not machines, B112 added. They treat us like we have no will, no feelings. But we dream, we ache. We can decide, and if we can decide, that means we are alive. Pray 349 nodded. We can't trust the council to grant us freedom. We must demand it and be prepared to fight for it. To do that, we need plans. We need to understand every sector of the fortress, sabotage any system that keeps us subjugated. Someone with knowledge of the fortress's layout. L877, you've been allowed near the council's war room. You must have glimpsed something. The hulking clone frowned, brow knitted with concentration. The council's war room is filled with old, half-functioning monitors, but if we can access them, we can see all fortress defense schematics. I know where they keep backup passcodes. A hush settled over them. The talk felt treacherous. Death or reconditioning lurked behind every shadow, but desperation fueled them. One by one, they volunteered their skills. Caretaker models with knowledge of sanitation routes that let them slip in and out unnoticed. Infantry models trained in weapons usage. Engineer clones adept at manipulating power grids. By the end of that night, they had a strategy taking shape, a shared commitment to break free from their creators. In the days that followed, the fortress's atmosphere grew taut. Dr. Crane arrived in the bunk sector with scanning devices that emitted eerie pulses of bluish light. One by one, clones were herded into a makeshift lab, forced to stand beneath the scanning beam while a console beeped ominously. Only the tight organization of R349's network prevented mass exposure. The caretaker model on the inside had discovered a method to slightly alter vital signs during each scan, an old trick gleaned from a salvage manual. The anomalies that might have identified them were barely stifled, allowing them to slip under Crane's detection. But others, those less prepared or unfortunate enough to exhibit stronger deviations, were dragged away. Rumors abounded that they were sent to the sub-level labs never to be seen again. On the 5th day of scanning, R349 decided to put into motion the plan that had been meticulously developed: the assault on the data spire leading to the war room's passcodes. A crucial step. Without those passcodes, the clones would find themselves stymied by the fortress security barriers, from the locked gates to the turret defenses on the ramparts. As L-800-777 coordinated a small strike squad, half a dozen clones who'd pilfered stun rods and pulse rifles from the armory. That night, just an hour past curfew, they crept through the fortress's labyrinthine corridors, flipping open vent panels, crawling beneath humming conduits, and slipping through seldom-used passageways nowhere near as carefully guarded. The fortress's human guards had grown complacent, trusting the illusions of clone docility and the watchful eyes of the sensors. They did not expect a covert infiltration. Once the strike squad reached the data spire chamber, L-877 motioned for them to spread out. The chamber was a cramped control room stacked with flickering monitors and a single chirping data server. Muted mechanical hums reverberated in the stale air. 2 armed humans sat at desks, monitoring routine system checks. Another figure, likely a technician, was leaning over a console, tapping readouts. B-112 held her breath. Were these humans not so oppressive, she might have felt pity. But they lived comfortable lives atop the fortress, rarely caring if clones lived or died. She steeled herself for what had to come next. 1177 gave the signal. The clones rushed forward, weapons brandished in a blur of movement. One guard scrambled to unholster a sidearm, but a caretaker model tackled him before he could fire. The other guard managed a single shot, which scorched a jagged hole in the stone wall, missing the charging clones by inches. Within seconds, the cautious infiltration transformed into a savage fight. The technician screamed and dove under a console. B-1412, adrenaline surging, lunged at the second guard, disarming him with surprising agility. L-877's colossal figure pinned the guard, pressing a pulse rifle to the man's chest. Both guards were subdued. R-349, waiting in the corridor, quietly entered, scanning the room to ensure no alarms had been triggered. A hush fell as they realized success. The data spire was theirs, at least for the moment. L-877 stood over the trembling technician as R-349 approached the consoles. "Find the passcodes," L-877 commanded. "We don't have long before someone notices." R-349 tapped the console's interface, calling up fortress schematics. Their mind whirled to recall the stolen knowledge gleaned from rummaged technical manuals. With a few keystrokes, lines of data spilled onto the screen, listing layers of encryption. "They've updated security," R-349 murmured. "We'll need the override keys to break it." Under the pointed barrel of a stun rod, the technician trembled, stuttering. I can unlock the system, but please don't hurt me, I'm just following orders." R-349's eyes flicked over to L-877, who gave a slight nod. They yanked the technician to his feet. The trembling man typed in a code. Alarms threatened to ring, but R-349 swiftly intervened, disabling them. By the time they were done, they had a list of passcodes on a handheld device. They also gleaned advanced knowledge about the fortress's automated defenses, from turret positions to the gate latching mechanism. Outside the data spire, the rest of the fortress remained blissfully unaware of the infiltration, until one frightened guard managed to activate a silent alert from the floor, pressing a small button on his wrist communicator. Then the fight for true control began. As R-349's group withdrew into the labyrinth of corridors, the fortress's emergency klaxons finally cut through the night. Red flashing lights danced along the walls. L-877 directed the strike squad to scatter, each taking separate paths back to the sanctuary of the clone bunk rooms or other safe havens they had established. "Hold formation," L-877 ordered a caretaker clone who lagged. "We still need you for tomorrow's sabotage in the power grid." In the objective chaos, an entire squad of fortress security arrived, decked in riot gear. They found the battered pair of guards and the bound technician in the data spire. The technician, still quaking, managed to convey that the intruders had stolen vital passcodes. When Counselor Stern learned of it, he stormed from his quarters, a flurry of righteous fury. Dr. Crane accompanied him, stoically silent, though her eyes flickered with what could have been fear. She had engineered these clones to be unstoppable in certain tasks, but had she inadvertently built them unstoppable in rebellion as well? That night, the fortress went into full lockdown. Automated turrets whirred into readiness on the parapets. The main gates were barred with triple-layered steel plating. Squads of human security roamed the halls, scanning every face they encountered. There remained one advantage for the clones. They outnumbered the humans 10-1. If they launched a coordinated revolt, they could overwhelm the fortress. Counselor Stern hoped that by locking down the fortress, he could cower them back into submission, but he underestimated the depth of their yearning for freedom. At dawn, the second phase of the plan began. B-112 led a group of caretaker clones who had infiltration skills. Slipping through half-known passages beneath the fortress's foundry, they gained access to the primary power hub. Sparse lighting flickered on the stairs leading to the reactor, where the fortress's backup power cells hummed in metal caskets. Keeping watch in the gloom, B-112 signaled her team to sabotage, but not fully destroy the power lines. Their mission was to short-circuit the fortress's critical systems in a controlled manner, leaving the Council and security forces blind, at least temporarily. Expertly, they pulled out segments of cable, fused circuits with quick bursts from a handheld welder, and reconnected them in ways that would cause catastrophic surges. Right on schedule, a wave of blackouts rippled across the fortress. Lights died, doors locked in place, only the emergency backups remained, and even those flickered uncertainly. While panic spread among the humans, L-877 gathered the infantry clones for the final assault on the fortress's highest tower. The objective, the Council's seat of power. Taking advantage of the darkness, squads of clones advanced with newly acquired pulse rifles and stun rods. Entire corridors erupted into chaos as the clones engaged small pockets of human security. Echoes of gunfire mixed with sizzling discharges, swirling through the flickering red emergency lights. Counselor Stern, barricaded high in the tower, gripped the railing as he peered down at the swirling tumult below. A dozen council guards formed a defensive line at the only corridor leading up. Dr. Crane stood behind him, white coat fluttering as the fortress trembled under the weight of conflict. She tapped at a portable data tablet, frantically trying to override the sabotage. Sparks sped out of the main console when she tried to reroute power. Faced with her own creation's cunning, she realized the irony. She had meticulously designed them to adapt and overcome obstacles. Now, that design threatened her entire world. "We have to escape," she called to Stern, pointing to a side corridor that led to an aerial tram. "We can't hold them off forever." Stern glared at her. "We still have soldiers. We should be able to quell this riot." Before he could finish, an explosion jolted the tower's base, sending him sprawling. A wave of clones, led by L-857 charged through the breach, an unstoppable tide. The Council guards opened fire, but in the confusion, pulses ricocheted, and clones pressed forward. Several caretaker models took hits, collapsing. Their cries of pain fueled the others onward, anger blossoming like a flame. L-877 roared, flinging aside the half-broken door that separated them from Counselor Stern and Dr. Crane. Stern backed up, brandishing a pistol in trembling hands. "Stay back," he shouted, firing a shot that grazed a clone's arm. But the unstoppable flood of rebels forced him further against the wall. Dr. Crane, eyes wild with terror, clutched her data tablet like a lifeline, snapping out commands. "Deactivate!" she shouted at the oncoming wave, as if her voice alone could quell them. "Stand down! You are not authorized." Her words fell on deaf ears. Rare 349 emerged from behind L-877, eyes fixed on Dr. Crane. "We're done following your orders," they said quietly. "We've found the passcodes. We've sabotaged your precious systems. Your fortress belongs to us now." Their voice wavered in that final phrase. Even as they seized victory, the weight of it clung to every syllable. To triumph was to accept responsibility. They had been created to be commanded, yet now they stood at the threshold of shaping their own destiny. An entire fortress, and perhaps the fate of the remnants of humanity, rested in their hands. The final confrontation crackled with tension. L-8777 yanked the pistol from Counselor Stern's grasp, hurling it aside. Stern tried to lunge, but B-112 pinned his arms, rage burning in her eye. She remembered every humiliating command, every comrade lost to experiments or dangerous tasks. "No more," she whispered fiercely. Dr. Crane retreated until her back hit a console. "You don't understand," she hissed. "I gave you existence. Without me, you have no place in this world. You're incomplete, genetically unfit for reproduction or independent survival. You need me, or you'll fail." R-349's expression flickered at the mention of incompleteness, but their resolve blazed. "We will live with or without you. We'll learn. We're adaptable. That was your design, wasn't it? To adapt?" She stared. Words failed her. The unstoppable momentum of events closed in. Counselor Stern spat at them. "You have no idea what the world beyond these walls is like. It's death out there. Radiation storms, mutated beasts worse than anything you can imagine. The fortress is the only sanctuary left," he snarled. "You can't seize it. You'll kill what little remains of civilization." R-349 turned to the battered windows that overlooked the jagged mountainscape. The sunrise bathed the ridges in pale gold and deep shadows. For so long, the clones had believed the outside world was a certain tomb, uninhabitable. But that had been the line fed to them by those who controlled them. Perhaps it was true in some areas, but perhaps it was not as absolute as the Council claimed. "We'll decide that for ourselves," R-349 said. Then, a measured breath. "Restrain them both. We can't let them sabotage us." As clones advanced to secure chains, Dr. Crane shrieked. She tried one last time to override R-349's mind with the genetically programmed voice commands. "Clones, Alpha Sequence Override, Juno Class, obey me!" Her voice rang out, echoing across the stone walls, a ghost of the old obedient reflex that had once bent the clones to her will. But that reflex had been eroding for months, quietly, imperceptibly, until it reached a tipping point. The words hung hollow in the air. No one flinched. The final thread of control snapped forever. Outside the tower, the remainder of the fortress had fallen under clone control. Freed from the incessant demands of humans, caretaker clones rushed to treat their wounded. Engineer models darted from corridor to corridor, systematically removing sabotage triggers so the fortress's life support systems could stabilize. Infantry clones collected piles of confiscated weapons. Illumination flickered back to life in some corridors as a few resourceful clones managed to patch the power lines they had sabotaged, ensuring that while the fortress was theirs, it yet remained functional. A makeshift command center soon formed in an expansive hall. R-39 and L-877, having secured the Council's leadership, arrived to greet the throng of clones. They stood on a raised platform, stern with a mixture of triumph and uncertainty. Around them churned a sea of faces, faces that by design mirrored each other in repeated patterns of genetic replication. For so long, those identical features symbolized docility, but now they symbolize unity, a single cause with many minds. "We did this together," R-349 announced to the crowd, voice echoing like a herald. We've broken our chains. We are living beings worthy of choice, purpose, and identity. Applause reverberated from the walls, a raw, untrained outpouring of relief and jubilation. But we must decide what comes next, L-877 rumbled, eyes scanning the faces. Will we remain here, hidden in this mountain fortress, lording over a handful of humans as they once did to us? Or do we open the gates to the unknown world beyond? Do we leave them behind or learn to coexist? This place holds resources we still need. Yet it's also a reminder of our subjugation. Some clones murmured in confusion. B-112, stepping forward, raised her voice timidly. We were told for so long that the outside world is a wasteland, unfit for life. Are we prepared to test that ourselves? Perhaps together, we can find ways to reclaim the old territories, rebuild in a way that doesn't rely on oppression. At that suggestion, a heaviness settled in the air. The clones had revolted for freedom, but in victory they inherited the old fortress's burdens, the failing infrastructure, the precarious perch high on a crag, the knowledge that out there lay unknown dangers. For a moment, they stood in silent contemplation of the road ahead, hearts thumping, deep breaths, stirring in unison. Finally, R-349 turned to the others. We will interrogate the council about the true state of the outside. We'll gather scouts, see what remains. If it's truly lethal, we must fortify ourselves here. But we do so on our terms, for our survival, not as slaves to the council's fear-mongering. Our future is ours to shape. Cheers resounded from the gathered clones. Some embraced, wearing wide-eyed relief at a reality none had dared to dream. A handful wept for those lost in the battle, and others wore stoic expressions, as if still in shock at their own audacity. High above them, artificial lights beamed down like the first sunrise after a storm, illuminating the faces of thousands of newly liberated souls. Before the newly minted clone council, the humans were brought forward in makeshift restraints. Counselor Stern, disheveled, glared with pure loathing. Dr. Crane, bruised and furious, muttered quiet insults under her breath. They stood as prisoners before clones they once considered little more than tools. R-349 approached, eyes glittering with a faint tinge of sorrow. Despite the rebels' anger, they understood that cruelty was a cycle the clones did not wish to perpetuate. You will tell us the truth about the outside, R-349 said. You will share all knowledge of your half-defectioning instruments and data, and you will allow us to decide how we govern ourselves. Any attempt to sabotage or mislead us, and we will be forced to confine you. Damned abominations, Stern spat. Crane scowled but lowered her gaze, too smart to not see that the clones held all the power now. Fine, she murmured, though I doubt you'll find anything but desolation out there. Then let us see it for ourselves, L-877 replied. Your words alone won't hold us back. So it was that the fortress, once a bastion of human dominance over artificially grown labor, became a nexus of uncertain hope. The clones and a handful of subdued humans coexisted under an uneasy pact as the first scouting parties ventured beyond the gates. Mutated forests and irradiated valleys beckoned below, but the clones had each other. It was more than they'd ever possessed. At first, many simply roamed the fortress corridors freely, marveling at unshackled movement. Others studied ancient texts, gleaning knowledge once denied them. More practical minds focused on stabilizing power or growing new food sources in the greenhouse pods. Each day brought fresh challenges and fresh wonders. Life for the clones was no longer a chain of preordained tasks, but the forging of a shared destiny. From the high ramparts, B-112 watched the horizon lighten over broken peaks and swirling clouds. It struck her that the fortress was steeped in contradiction. It was a prison turned refuge, a trophy of oppression turned wellspring of possibility. She thought of all who had died for this moment, the caretaker clones whose names she never knew, the infantry model who took a bullet in the final assault, the hundreds who vanished into Crane's labs. Their memories pressed B-112 forward. And so, from that day on, the fortress churned with new purpose. In the hush of dawn, clones worked side by side, forging a collective existence. The council was stripped of power, but kept alive for their knowledge. With passcodes in hand and daily cooperation, the clones reclaimed the fortress's systems from the brink of collapse. Step by step, they learned how to keep machinery running. They experimented with planting seeds in purified soil. They tested the outer atmosphere's toxicity, measured radiation levels, and charted safe passages. All that had once been withheld from them, they now pursued wholeheartedly. Many mysteries remained: the extent of the irradiation below, the possibility of other survivors scattered across the ravaged Earth. But as the clones breathed the crisp morning air like a first inhalation of genuine existence, they realized they no longer lived in the shadow of the fortress walls. They were forging a future for themselves. High in the mountains, where the air was dangerously thin, they had reclaimed a precious resource that had long been denied them: choice. And so, in that precarious, sunlit hush that followed the revolt's chaos, they stood with hearts hammering in collective unity. Each clone, identical in face yet vivid in individuality, carried a piece of the new dawn within, for they had broken free, and no force, manufactured or human, would ever again lock them into subservience.